Max Carter had never imagined that his dream house would come with such unexpected surprises. It was a humble suburban home, nothing too extravagant, but just perfect for someone like him who sought peace and a fresh start after years of turmoil. The peeling wallpaper and dim lighting were easily overlooked when compared to the house's potential. It was exactly what Max had been searching for, a blank slate. After years of living in cramped apartments, moving from city to city, Max had finally saved enough money to buy this house on the edge of town. A house with character, history, and space, something he could make his own. But as he stood at the foot of the basement stairs, staring into the dark abyss that awaited him, Max felt something far more than excitement. It was a shiver down his spine, a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. It felt as though the house itself was alive, holding secrets it didn't want to give up. The silence was thick in the air, as if even the house was holding its breath. He had been down there once, just to take a quick look around when he first moved in. But today was different. Max had finally gotten around to clearing out the clutter, left behind by the previous owners, and as he approached the basement door, he felt the unmistakable pull of curiosity. There was something hidden down there, something he hadn't noticed before. Taking a deep breath, Max grabbed the door handle and turned. The hinges groaned as the door opened, and a sudden gust of musty air hit his face. His eyes struggled to adjust to the dim light from a single bulb hanging overhead. The air was stale, and the floor was cluttered with boxes, old furniture, and forgotten trinkets. Nothing out of the ordinary, or so he thought. Max began to work, tossing aside old furniture and boxes of forgotten memories, his mind wandering. He was lost in the rhythm of clearing space, not thinking much about what was behind the piles of forgotten items. But then he found it, a strange metallic box, half buried under layers of old newspapers and dust. At first, he thought it was just another old relic, something left behind by the previous owners. But as soon as his fingers brushed against it, he felt an unusual warmth emanating from the metal, like it had been recently touched by someone. He frowned and pulled the box free. It was heavy, much heavier than it looked, and its surface was smooth, almost too smooth, nothing like the rusted, decayed metal Max had expected to find in a place like this. The box was covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift in the light, flickering like shadows when he glanced at them. His heart raced as he placed the box on the floor. His hands trembled as he examined it more closely. What the hell was this? He could make no sense of the symbols. There was no known language he could identify. He knew nothing about ancient artifacts or strange technology, but the more he stared at the box, the more it seemed to call to him. Max reached for the latch, instinctively feeling the need to open it. But the moment his fingers touched the metal, a strange hum filled the air, like a low vibration pulsing through the floor beneath him. He jerked his hand back, startled. Suddenly the hum intensified, and before Max could react, the floor beneath him seemed to shift. His feet slipped, sending him crashing to the ground, and he caught a glimpse of something strange, a glowing light that seemed to pulse and spread from the box. His heart pounded in his chest as panic set in. And then the light was gone. The basement was silent again, save for his heavy breathing. He stared at the spot where the box had been, now eerily still. Max slowly stood, his legs shaking, and reached for the box once more, half expecting it to vanish or disappear entirely. Instead, the box was gone. Max's breath hitched, and his pulse quickened. He looked around the basement in a panic, but there was nothing, just the dust, the debris, and the dim light from the single bulb overhead. It felt like he had dreamed it all, but the unease in his gut told him otherwise. But then something shifted in the corner of the room. Max's eyes darted to the shadows, his body instinctively freezing. At first, he saw nothing, just the usual clutter that had once been tucked away in the dark. But then, there it was. A figure. A woman standing in the farthest corner of the room, barely visible in the dim light. Her hair was long, flowing and silvery, like something out of a dream. She stood motionless, staring at him, her eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. Max's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. He took a cautious step forward, his body stiff with fear and confusion. Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The woman tilted her head, her eyes never leaving his. Then, in a voice that sent a chill through his bones, she spoke. "I am your wife." Max froze. His mind raced, trying to process her words. His wife? No, that wasn't possible. He was single. He had never seen her before. There was no way she could be his wife, but the way she spoke, the certainty in her voice, made it seem as though she was telling the truth. "My what?" Max stammered, taking another step back. The woman stepped forward, her movements unnaturally smooth, as if she was gliding. "I am your wife. I've been waiting for you," she said again, each word deliberate, as though each one carried a weight that Max could barely comprehend. Max's head spun. This was insane. How could she be his wife? Who was she? Why was she in his basement? He looked around, his senses heightened, as if the room itself had grown heavier. The basement, which moments ago had been a place of mundane clutter, now felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in on him as he struggled to understand the impossible reality unfolding before him. Before he could say anything else, the woman's eyes narrowed. "You don't believe me," she said softly, almost as if she were saddened by the disbelief in his eyes. "But I can prove it to you. We were meant to be together." Max's heart raced. Every instinct in his body screamed for him to leave, to run upstairs and call the police. But something in her presence held him there. He couldn't explain it, couldn't understand it. But he was drawn to her, to the mystery of her. His voice, shaky but determined, broke through the silence. "How do you know me? How do you know about me?" he demanded, his mind racing to find answers. The woman stepped closer, her glowing eyes fixed on his. "You don't remember, do you?" She tilted her head again, as if studying him. "It's all right, I'll help you remember." Max's breath hitched, and a cold sweat broke out on his brow. This wasn't just some strange encounter. This was something much deeper, something he wasn't prepared for. The woman's voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm here because you need me, and I need you. You've always known, Max. You've always known." His mind raced. Was she a lunatic? Was this some sort of joke? He shook his head, his thoughts muddled. He needed answers. He needed to understand what was happening, but before he could respond, the woman stepped forward, her hand outstretched, her fingers almost brushing against his skin. "You'll understand soon enough, Max. Soon enough." Max's body tensed, as a strange warmth spread through his chest, his pulse quickening. For the briefest moment, he thought he saw something more, something alien, beneath the surface of her skin. But when he blinked, it was gone. And then, in the flicker of a moment, the woman vanished. Disappeared into thin air, leaving Max alone. In the basement, the hum from earlier filled the air once again, a low, vibrating sound that made his heart race. It was as if the house itself was alive, waiting for him to make the next move. Max stood there in stunned silence, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His mind was reeling, his body frozen. He had no idea what had just happened, what he had just seen. But one thing was certain, his life was about to change forever. Max stared into the empty space where the woman had been standing just moments ago. His mind buzzed, trying to process what had just happened. Had it been a hallucination, a trick of the light? But everything about her, the way she looked, the way she spoke, felt so real, the chill that ran through him as she touched him. That couldn't have been faked. He wiped the sweat from his brow, trying to steady his breathing. His pulse was racing, and his chest felt tight, as if the weight of everything was finally pressing down on him. He glanced around the basement, half expecting the woman to reappear, but there was nothing. Just the same cluttered room he'd been in for the last few hours. Max shook his head. This couldn't be happening. There had to be some explanation, a psychological one. Maybe the stress of moving into a new house was getting to him. The isolation, the late nights. But deep down, he knew this wasn't some trick of his mind. He had seen her. She had been real, and she had called herself his wife. He took a step forward, moving toward the corner of the basement where she had appeared, scanning the shadows for any sign of her. Nothing. There was no trace of her presence. Left, no footprints, no disturbances in the dust. Just the eerie, unsettling silence of the house. Max exhaled sharply. This was insane. His thoughts spiraled, and he felt a pang of panic creeping up his spine. He turned back toward the stairs, his fingers gripping the railing as he made his way up to the main floor. The moment he stepped through the basement door, he slammed it shut behind him, as if that would somehow protect him from the strange, unexplainable event. But even as he closed the door, the feeling of dread didn't leave him. It lingered, hanging in the air like a thick fog. The house, which had seemed so welcoming when he first bought it, now felt foreign, like it was hiding something. Max made his way into the living room and collapsed onto the couch, rubbing his temples. His thoughts were all over the place and nothing made sense. The woman, the box, the glowing light. What did it all mean? Why had she called herself his wife? And what was this strange connection he felt to her? His phone buzzed, breaking his train of thought. Max reached for it absently, trying to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of his mind. It was a text from his best friend, Matt. Matt. You. Good man, I know moving is stressful. Let me know if you need anything. Max stared at the message for a long moment, his thumb hovering over the screen. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him, but he wasn't ready to tell anyone, especially Matt, what had happened. Who would believe him? He barely believed it himself. He typed a quick reply, trying to sound normal. Max. Yeah, just a lot of work. Thanks, though. After sending the message, he tossed the phone aside and stood up. He needed to get his mind off of this. He needed to do something normal, something that wasn't completely out of his control. Max wandered to the kitchen and started preparing a quick dinner, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the basement, to the woman, to the strange sensation that lingered in the air. The minutes turned to hours as Max tried to shake the feeling of unease. He ate in silence, staring blankly at the walls. The house felt quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that was unnerving, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. And then it did. Max jumped as the sound of a door creaking open echoed through the house. His heart skipped a beat. The front door. He glanced at the clock. It was late, well past midnight. Who could be at his door this time of night? He grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, and crept cautiously toward the front door. His steps were slow, deliberate. The house seemed to stretch with every step, the distance from the living room to the door feeling impossibly long. Max reached for the doorknob, his hand shaking, and then froze. There, standing in the doorway, was the woman. The same woman from the basement. Her hair was long and flowing, shimmering under the dim light of the porch. Her eyes were glowing, faintly, and her skin had a strange, ethereal quality. She looked different, more intense somehow. Her presence felt more real. Max's breath caught in his throat. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He wanted to ask who she was, why she was here, but nothing made sense. It was as if his thoughts were frozen in time. I'm not here to harm you, Max, she said softly, her voice calm yet urgent. I'm here because you need to understand. Max blinked, struggling to make sense of what was happening. Understand what? He finally managed to croak. The woman took a step forward, and Max instinctively took a step back. She held up a hand as if to reassure him. You don't remember, but you will. Max's confusion deepened. Remember what? What are you talking about? I'm here because I've been waiting for you, she said, her voice soft but filled with an undeniable intensity. You're not from here. You don't belong in this world, Max. He stared at her, his heart hammering in his chest. What do you mean? What are you talking about? Her gaze softened for a moment, as if she were trying to find the right words. You were born to lead, Max, to fulfill a purpose greater than you can imagine. You've always known deep down that you were different. And now, I'm here to help you remember. Max shook his head, his mind reeling. I don't understand. None of this makes sense. Who are you? What do you want from me? The woman stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. I want you to remember, Max. I want you to understand why you're here. You were chosen, and I... She paused for a moment, her gaze filled with sorrow. I'm here to guide you. Max's thoughts were a whirlwind, but one question bubbled to the surface. Why me? She met his gaze, her eyes burning with a strange intensity. Because you are my mate. Max stumbled back, his chest tightening. You're what? Her eyes flickered with a flash of something Max couldn't quite place. You were always meant to be with me. We're connected, Max, in a way you can't fully understand yet, but you will. Max's mind was spinning. He wanted to run, to get away from her, from this whole situation, but her words kept echoing in his head. You were meant to be with me. We're connected. His chest tightened again, a strange warmth spreading through his body. It was as though her words were pulling at something deep inside him, a hidden part of himself that he hadn't even known existed. He felt it, deep in his bones, like an ancient call that resonated through every fiber of his being. I don't know what you're talking about, Max whispered, his voice trembling. The woman stepped forward again, her eyes filled with a mixture of longing and sadness. You will, Max, you will, but for now you need to trust me. What you're feeling isn't a mistake. It's not madness. It's the truth. Max shook his head, unable to process everything. No, this can't be real. She reached out, gently touching his arm, and a strange warmth spread through him, like a flood of energy rushing through his veins. It's real, all of it. The connection, the purpose, and me. Max felt a surge of emotions, conflicting and overwhelming, flooding his senses. His mind was fighting against everything she was telling him, but deep down, a part of him, something primal, something ancient, knew that there was truth in her words. The woman's gaze softened, and for a moment she almost looked human, just like him, almost. I'm not from your world, Max, and neither are you. And then, in an instant, she was gone. Disappeared, leaving Max standing in the doorway, breathless and more confused than ever. The room around him seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, and Max realized in that moment that nothing would ever be the same again. Max woke up with a start, his body drenched in sweat. The early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. His heart was racing, his breath shallow and erratic. He sat up in bed, clutching the sheets as if they were the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. His mind was still caught in the whirlwind of emotions, the chaos of the events that had unfolded the night before. The woman, the alien, had appeared in his doorway, claiming that they were connected in ways that defied logic and reason. But how? Was it possible? He had thought it was a dream, some kind of delusion brought on by stress and exhaustion. But now, after waking up, he wasn't so sure. Max rubbed his eyes, trying to clear the fog from his mind. This couldn't be happening, it just couldn't. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that everything in his life had led to this moment. The house, the basement, the strange woman who said she was his wife. The way she had touched him, the warmth that had spread through him like an electric current. There was no way that could have been a hallucination. He got out of bed, his legs unsteady as he made his way to the window. The morning sun was warm, and the birds outside chirped merrily, a stark contrast to the storm that raged inside his mind. He glanced down at his phone, the screen flickering to life. It was a message from Matt again. Matt. Yo, you all right? You've been acting weird. You haven't answered my calls. Max ran a hand through his hair. He had been avoiding Matt for most of the day, too shaken up to even think about talking to anyone, let alone explain what had happened. He couldn't even explain it to himself. He typed out a quick response. Max. Yeah, just a lot on my mind. Let's talk later. He hit send and tossed the phone on the bed, pacing the room. The day ahead was supposed to be filled with the mundane tasks of settling into his new house, but the reality of the situation had thrown everything off balance. What was he supposed to do now? How could he go about his life knowing that someone was out there claiming to be his wife, an alien who had somehow been waiting for him? Max knew that he couldn't keep avoiding the truth. He needed to find answers. He had to know who she was, what she wanted, and most importantly, why she had come to him. It wasn't just curiosity, it was a need for closure, for understanding, for something that would make sense of the chaos in his life. The house felt strangely empty as Max made his way downstairs. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound that broke the silence. He walked into the kitchen and poured himself a cup of coffee, staring out the window as he tried to organize his thoughts. He needed to go back to the basement. He had to see if there was something, anything, that could explain what had happened. Maybe there was a clue, something that would make this madness less impossible. Max set down his coffee and grabbed his jacket, walking out of the kitchen and toward the basement door. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the knob. The door creaked open, revealing the familiar, dimly lit space below. The air in the basement was cooler than he remembered, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer, as if something was waiting just out of sight. Max took a deep breath and descended the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He reached the bottom and paused, scanning the room. Everything looked the same. The cluttered piles of boxes, the old furniture, the dim light from the single bulb hanging overhead. But there was something different now, something ominous. Max's eyes drifted to the far corner, the place where the woman had appeared the night before. There was no sign of her, no indication that she had been there at all. The floor was undisturbed, the air still. It was as if the whole encounter had been a dream. But Max knew it hadn't been. He could still feel the heat of her touch on his arm, the surge of energy that had rushed through his veins when she had spoken to him. It had been real. So why couldn't he find any evidence of it? He walked over to the corner, his feet dragging as he approached the spot where she had stood. As he bent down to examine the floor, his eyes caught something glinting in the low light. It was small, almost invisible against the dust and grime of the basement floor. He reached down and picked it up, his fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. It was a key. Max turned it over in his hand, inspecting it carefully. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The metal was smooth and reflective, almost too perfect, with strange markings etched along the sides. It didn't look like any key from this world. His heart skipped a beat as he realized what it meant. This was a clue, a piece of the puzzle he had been searching for. He pocketed the key and stood up, suddenly more determined than ever to find out the truth. There was more to this house, to the woman, to his own existence, than he had ever imagined. Max climbed back up the stairs, his mind racing. He needed to figure out where the key fit. He needed answers. He had to confront her again. It was late, afternoon by the time Max gathered the courage to call Matt back. His friend had been calling him non-stop for hours, and he knew that avoiding him any longer would only make things worse. Yo, man. You okay? Matt's voice came through the phone, a mix of concern and frustration. "I'm fine," Max replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "Just been dealing with some stuff." "Some stuff? You've been acting like a freak for the past day. What's going on?" Max sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't even know how to explain it. Something weird happened. Yesterday." "What kind of weird?" Matt pressed. Max hesitated. How could he tell Matt that he had just met an alien in his basement, a woman who claimed to be his wife? How could he even begin to explain that? "I don't know," Max muttered. I don't know what's real anymore." There was silence on the other end of the line. Max could hear Matt's breathing as he processed his words. "All right. Man, you don't have to tell me everything. But if you need help, you know I'm here, right?" Max didn't know how to respond to that. What could he say? The situation was beyond help, beyond anything he could explain. "Yeah, thanks," he finally said, the words feeling hollow. He didn't need help, he needed answers. And no one, not even Matt, could give him those. He hung up and stared at the phone, the weight of his situation pressing down on him once again. The strange key in his pocket felt like a ticking time bomb, waiting to reveal the next part of this bizarre mystery. Max had no choice now. He had to face the woman. He had to face whatever it was she had pulled him into. And as he walked toward the basement once again, he knew that the answers he sought would come at a cost. He just hoped it wasn't too high a price. Max sat in his car, staring at the house. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, fear, and something else, something he couldn't quite name. The key in his pocket felt heavier with each passing second. The weight of it was pressing down on him, urging him to do something, anything, to uncover the truth that had been so elusive. The house was quiet, the only sound the soft rustling of the trees outside. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard, but Max didn't move. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. It had been hours since he'd found the key, but the more he thought about it, the less he understood. It was real. Everything had been real. The alien in his basement, her claim that she was his wife, and now the mysterious key. It all had to mean something. But what? The woman, who to his growing disbelief seemed to be more than just some strange figure in his life, had to have answers. She had to know what was going on, what this key meant and how it all connected. But could he trust her? Max thought back to their last meeting, the warmth of her touch, the strange connection he felt. It had been as though a switch had been flipped in his mind, and all at once he had understood something about himself, about her, about the universe. But that understanding had slipped away like water through his fingers, and now he was left with more questions than ever. Taking a deep breath, Max opened the car door and stepped out. His boots crunched against the gravel as he walked toward the house. The key was still in his pocket, its cold weight a constant reminder of the mystery that awaited him inside. The door to the basement stood like a silent sentinel, waiting for him. Max's hand hovered over the doorknob, but he hesitated. There was something about the basement, something that made him feel both drawn to it and repelled by it at the same time. The house was old, the floorboards creaking underfoot, but the basement felt different. It felt alive, as if the very air in that room was imbued with something otherworldly. Max took a deep breath and opened the door. The stairs leading down into the basement were dark, the only light coming from a single flickering bulb above. He descended slowly, his hand gripping the railing for support as he navigated the narrow steps. Each step seemed to echo in the silence, the soft thud of his feet the only sound that accompanied him. When he reached the bottom, he paused, scanning the room. The basement seemed unchanged, but there was an unmistakable shift in the atmosphere. It felt heavier, as though the air itself was charged with an electric hum. And then he saw her. She stood in the corner, her presence like a magnet pulling him toward her. The woman, His wife, as she had claimed, was watching him with an unreadable expression on her face. Her eyes were dark, almost black, and they seemed to pierce through him as if she could see into the very core of his being. Max swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing. He had so many questions, but the first one escaped his lips before he could stop it. "Who are you?" The woman's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. She took a step toward him, her movements fluid and graceful. There was an undeniable elegance about her, a calmness that seemed to radiate from her. Yet beneath the surface, Max could sense something powerful, something dangerous. "I told you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I am your wife." Max frowned, his mind racing. "But how? How can you be my wife? I don't even know you." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "You don't remember, do you?" Her voice held a trace of sadness, as though she were disappointed by his lack of understanding. "I don't remember anything about you," Max said, his frustration rising. I don't get it. You show up in my basement and claim that you're my wife, and now you've given me this key, and none of it makes any sense." The woman's expression softened, and she took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "It's not supposed to make sense yet, not to you, but you will understand soon." Max shook his head, feeling a surge of disbelief. "I don't understand anything right now." The woman's eyes glinted with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. "You will, but first you need to trust me." Max took a step back, his mind still reeling from the whirlwind of events. He couldn't trust her, not yet. There was too much about her, about the whole situation, that didn't add up. "I don't know if I can," Max admitted. "You say you're my wife, but I don't even know who you are. What if you're lying?" She sighed softly, a deep, almost mournful sound. "I'm not lying, Max. You just don't remember. But the truth is, inside of you, you just need to unlock it." Max's heart raced as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the key. He held it up in front of her, his eyes never leaving hers. "What is this?" he demanded. "What does this key mean? Why did you give it to me?" For a moment, the woman said nothing. She simply stared at the key, her gaze flickering with something that resembled recognition, or perhaps fear. "That key is more than just a piece of metal," she said, her voice low and full of gravity. "It's a key to your past, to our past, to everything that brought us together. You don't remember, but you will. Everything will come back to you." Max looked down at the key, his mind whirling. He had to know more. He had to understand. This was no ordinary key. The markings on it, the strange aura that seemed to emanate from it, there was something powerful about it, and it was connected to his life, to his future. He glanced up at the woman. "So what happens now?" Her lips curled into a slow smile. But there was something dark behind her eyes, something that made Max uneasy. "Now we begin," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Now you'll start to remember." Max spent the next few hours in the basement with the woman, who insisted on teaching him everything. She told him about the key, about its significance, and about the history between their two worlds. It was hard for Max to believe, but as she spoke, he couldn't deny the sense of déjà vu that crept over him. Everything she said seemed familiar, as if his mind were trying to piece together a puzzle that had been scattered long ago. She told him that the key was not just a physical object, but a symbol of a bond that transcended time and space. It had been passed down through generations, a marker of those chosen to carry it. But why had it been given to him? Why had he been chosen? The woman explained that their union was not just a marriage, it was part of a larger plan, something beyond their understanding, something that involved the fate of both their species. Max listened intently, his skepticism slowly giving way to a growing sense of wonder. He had no choice but to believe her, because deep down, a part of him already did. But there was still so much he didn't know, so much left to uncover. "I still don't understand," he admitted after a long silence. "What am I supposed to do with this key? What do I have to do next?" The woman stood up and walked to the far side of the basement where a small, old-fashioned wooden chest sat. She opened it carefully, revealing a collection of strange artifacts, each one gleaming with an otherworldly light. She picked one up, a small, intricate device that looked like a cross between a watch and a compass, and handed it to Max. "This is the next step," she said, her voice steady. "You'll need this to find the truth. The key will guide you, but this will show you the path." Max held the device in his hand, feeling its cool surface against his skin. He looked up at the woman, his mind racing with questions. "Where do I go from here?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Follow the signs," she replied. "The answers are out there, and you're the one who has to find them." As Max stood there, the weight of the key in his pocket and the device in his hand, he realized that his life would never be the same again. This was just the beginning, and he was ready to face whatever came next. Max stood alone in the basement, the weight of the alien device in his hand growing heavier with each passing second. His mind was a flurry of confusion, wonder, and fear. He had felt the power of the key, of the bond it had formed, but this new device, the one the woman had given him, seemed to carry a different kind of weight. It was as if it was a map, a compass, that would lead him to answers he wasn't sure he was ready to find. His eyes flickered between the device in his hand and the woman who stood across from him, her eyes as unreadable as ever. He could feel the invisible pull between them, a connection that was growing stronger with every passing moment, but he still didn't understand what was happening or why it was happening to him. The woman stepped forward slowly, her voice soft but firm. "The path you need to walk isn't easy, Max. You must be prepared to face the truth, no matter how difficult or dangerous it may be." Max swallowed hard, his heart pounding. "I don't even know what the truth is. You keep saying I'll understand, but I'm just lost. Why me? Why is this happening?" Her gaze softened, a flicker of sympathy crossing her face. But it was fleeting, quickly replaced by something more serious. "You were chosen because you have a unique connection to both worlds, the human world and mine. Your past life, it's tied to something much larger than you can possibly imagine." He could feel the words weighing on him. The past life. What did she mean by that? Had he lived before? He had heard stories, myths about reincarnation, about people being reborn. But this felt different. This felt as if something far more profound was at play, something that spanned across time, space, and dimensions. "I don't know how to process all this," Max confessed, his voice tight. "How do I know what's real anymore? You tell me I'm supposed to be part of something greater, but I'm still just me. I'm still the guy who bought a house and found an alien in his basement. None of this makes sense." The woman's eyes darkened for a moment, and then she took a deep breath. "I know this is hard for you, but it is real, Max, all of it. The key, the device, our connection, it's all real. And the answers you seek are just within your reach. You have to trust that." Max clenched his fists, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I can trust anything right now." He threw the device onto the ground, the metallic clang echoing through the basement. "I just want answers. I don't want to be part of some cosmic plan or whatever this is." For a brief moment the woman looked as though she might speak, but she stopped herself. Instead, she walked over to him, her movement graceful and slow. She knelt down and picked up the device, her fingers gently tracing the edges. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "You've already been part of this plan," she said softly. "You just don't remember. You've been chosen for something much bigger than you realize. You're not just a bystander in this. Your role is essential. The device, the key, they're not just symbols, they're tools. Tools that will unlock the answers you seek, but only if you're willing to face the truth. Max felt a chill run through him as the words sank in. His role was essential. What did that even mean? He had no idea what he was supposed to do, what he was supposed to be. But there was one thing he knew for sure. He had to keep moving forward. He had to understand, even if it meant facing things he wasn't ready to see. The woman stood up and handed him the device once more. "Take it. We need to go." Max took the device, his fingers gripping it tightly. "Where are we going?" "To find the answers, the place where the key will lead you." Max stared at her, confusion clouding his thoughts. "And where's that?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped toward the corner of the basement, where a strange, glowing symbol was etched into the wall. It looked ancient, like something from a time long forgotten. As Max watched, the symbol seemed to pulse, the light within it growing. Brighter with each passing second, the woman reached out and placed her hand on the symbol, and as she did, the entire room seemed to shift. The air grew heavier, and the walls trembled as if the very foundation of the house was being altered. Max stepped back, his heart racing. "What's happening?" he demanded, his voice rising in panic. "This is it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is the gateway. It's time." Before Max could respond, the symbol flared with a blinding light, and the basement seemed to vanish beneath him. For a moment everything went dark. Then, with a sudden jolt, he found himself standing in a place that could only be described as alien. The world around him was like nothing he had ever seen. The sky was a deep, swirling shade of purple, with strange, glowing orbs floating in the air. The ground beneath his feet was soft and pulsating, as if the very earth was alive. In the distance, towering structures rose into the sky, their surfaces shimmering with an ethereal light. Max felt his breath catch in his throat as he took it all in. He wasn't in his basement anymore. He wasn't even on Earth. Max turned to the woman who was standing beside him, her expression calm, almost serene. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "This is my world," she said, her gaze sweeping across the strange landscape. "This is where it all began." Max looked around, trying to make sense of the scene, but nothing made sense. Nothing could. "What do I do now? How do I find the answers here?" "You'll know when the time comes," she said. "For now, we need to find the place where the key belongs, the place where everything starts." Max nodded, though doubt still clung to him. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of the impossible, but he knew he had no choice but to follow. He had come this far. There was no turning back. They began walking, the strange landscape stretching out before them. As they moved, Max couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The air felt charged with energy, and every step he took seemed to reverberate in the stillness. He could hear the faintest hum in the distance, like the sound of machinery, but it was so far away that he couldn't tell where it was coming from. "How long have you been here?" Max asked, breaking the silence. The woman didn't immediately respond. She walked a few steps ahead of him before answering. "I was born here, but I didn't always live here. I lived on Earth until I was called back. Until I was sent to find you." Max blinked, trying to process her words. "You were sent to find me?" She nodded. "Yes. There's something about you, Max. Something that connects our worlds, and you are the key to saving both of them." Max's head spun. "I'm supposed to save two worlds?" "Yes," she replied simply, "but you'll need the key to do it." Max's heart pounded in his chest. The key, the device, everything he had learned seemed to be converging into one terrifying truth. The fate of two worlds rested on his shoulders, and he didn't even understand how or why. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn. Back now. As they walked, the landscape shifted again, the colors of the sky growing darker as they approached a massive, glowing structure in the distance. It stood tall, its surface covered in intricate symbols, like an ancient temple or a forgotten monument. "This is it," the woman said, her voice steady. "The place where everything began. The place where you'll find the answers." Max swallowed, hard, feeling a chill run through him. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew that whatever came next would change everything. And he was ready for it. The air around Max shimmered as the alien structure loomed before him, the symbols on its surface pulsated with an eerie glow, casting an ethereal light across the ground beneath his feet. He felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation, a sensation that seemed to resonate from the very core of his being. His thoughts raced as he tried to comprehend the magnitude of the journey that had led him here. He had entered a world so unlike his own, a world that felt as alien as the woman beside him. And yet it was clear now, he was part of it. His fate was entwined with something far greater than he could have ever imagined, the woman beside him, whom he had come to trust. Despite the confusion and fear she evoked, was silent. Her eyes remained focused on the glowing structure ahead, as if she too knew that this was the culmination of everything. She had led him here, guided him through the unknown, but now even she seemed uncertain of what would come next. Max took a deep breath, steadying himself. "What now?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper, swallowed by the vastness of the alien landscape. The woman did not answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate, as if drawn toward the temple-like structure. Max followed, his footsteps echoing in the stillness of the world. Every step felt heavier than the last, each one a reminder of how far he had come and how little he understood. When they reached the base of the structure, the woman turned to him. Her expression was calm, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, something that spoke of both sadness and hope. "This is where your journey ends, Max," she said softly, "and where it begins again." Max frowned, the words unsettling him. "What do you mean, begins again?" She raised a hand and placed it on one of the symbols on the structure, and in an instant, the entire monument seemed to come alive. The air hummed with energy, and the symbols began to shift, rearranging themselves like a living language. The ground beneath Max's feet trembled slightly, as if the structure itself was awakening after a long slumber. "You were always meant to be here," the woman said, her voice steady despite the growing intensity of the scene. "Your past, your present, everything has led you to this moment. The key, the device, the bond between us. It was all part of a greater design." Max stared at her, his confusion growing. "I don't understand. What's the design? What's happening here?" The woman's eyes softened, a trace of sadness in her gaze. "The design is the balance between worlds, Max. Your world, the one you know, is part of something much bigger, something that spans across galaxies and dimensions. And you were chosen to be the bridge." Max's mind reeled. "The bridge between worlds." "Yes," she confirmed. "The key you hold, the device you've carried, it's not just a tool, it's a catalyst. It has the power to connect worlds that have been separated for eons. But that power comes with a price, a choice that only you can make." The air around them grew colder, the energy in the atmosphere crackling with a sense of impending change. Max felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The truth was beginning to take shape, but the pieces were still scattered, impossible to grasp fully. He had been told so much, but the answers he sought were just beyond his reach. "What choice?" Max asked, his voice trembling slightly with the weight of the moment. "What do I have to decide?" The woman turned away from him, her gaze shifting toward the structure, which was now radiating with a blinding light. You can either restore the balance between the worlds, but in doing so, you must sever the connection between them forever. The worlds will never cross paths again, and you will return to your life, your Earth. But without the knowledge of what lies beyond, it will be as though this never happened. Max felt his stomach lurch. And if I don't restore the balance, what happens then? The woman's gaze hardened. If you don't restore the balance, both worlds will collapse into chaos. The connection between them will continue to fracture, and the destruction will be felt in both realms. It's a choice between salvation and oblivion. Max stared at the structure, his mind racing. The weight of the decision was suffocating, crushing him under its enormity. Save two worlds, or let them destroy each other. Could he truly sever the connection, erase everything he had experienced, and go back to a life that would never be the same again? The woman stepped forward, her expression solemn. The key will only work if you're ready to let go. You cannot save both worlds without making a sacrifice. The key binds you to this moment. Your decision will shape the future, for both you and for the worlds connected by this bond. Max closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. The chaos, the uncertainty, the fear, it all swirled in his mind like a storm he couldn't escape. And yet, amidst the fear, there was a flicker of understanding, a realization that maybe, just maybe, this was his purpose. He had been brought here for a reason, not by chance, but by fate. He thought of his life on Earth, the simplicity of it, the way it had felt when he had first stepped into the house, unaware of the strange fate that awaited him. But that life, that version of himself, was no longer the man he was now. He had changed. He had seen things that no one else could even begin to comprehend, and he had felt the weight of the choices that now rested on his shoulders. His fingers gripped the device tighter as the decision grew clearer in his mind. The fear was still there, but it was no longer the dominant force. It was replaced by something stronger: determination, responsibility, and a sense of purpose. "I understand," Max said, his voice low but steady. "I'll do it. I'll restore the balance." The woman nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Are you ready?" Max nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know if he was ready. He didn't know if anyone could ever be ready for something like this. But he knew it was the only choice he could make. For the worlds, for the future, for everything that had led him here. The woman stepped back, allowing him space. The structure before them continued to pulse with energy, and the light from the symbols grew more intense. Max could feel the power surging through the air, filling the space with a strange, unearthly hum. He stepped forward, his hand outstretched toward the structure. As his fingers brushed the surface, the light enveloped him, and the world seemed to fade away. For a moment, there was nothing but pure, unfiltered light. It was as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling around him, the past, the present, and the future merging into one singularity of time and space. Max's mind seemed to expand, touching the edges of the universe itself, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded. The world returned to its normal state, and Max found himself standing in the basement once more. The house, the alien woman, the strange, glowing structure, everything was gone. It was as if none of it had ever happened. But as Max stood there, in the silence of the basement, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. He had made the choice, and the worlds had been restored. He had saved them, but at what cost? The answers would come in time. But for now, he was left with one truth. He had changed the course of history.